Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you're watching this Inspiring Workplaces Inspirathon. Pleased to say that this is not the first time I've been involved in it, so thanks to Matt Manners, Amy, and the team for inviting me in again. So I'm Perry. I'm going to be talking to you a little bit more about HR and change, because let's face it, there's plenty of that. So great to be part of this. My organisation, People and Transformational HR, is part of the top 50 inspiring workplaces for EMEA for 2023. So really proud of that. We're a Flexa verified, certified B Corporation. We're World Blue listed, freedom centred organisation, and we're climate active. So yes, let's get into it without further ado. So HR as an accelerant of inspiring change is the nature of my talk. A little bit more about me in terms of biography there, but for the last 11 plus years, I've been the Chief Energy Officer for People and Transformational HR, or PTHR as we call it. Written a couple of books, popped up on a couple of TEDx talks, a few accreditations, a few nice accolades. But let's see what we can talk a little bit more about in terms of that concept, HR as an accelerant of inspiring change. So before we go in there, let's start with a hypothesis. So this sense that HR practices in response to 2020's pandemic was something that I think we all perhaps found both a challenge and almost surprisingly effective when we were talking about lack of precedent and some real complex, chaotic situations. But HR stepped in and showed some real value, impact, and inspiration. So it's more of that, really. What next? What's after that? We've been probably at least a year kind of post-pandemic and lockdown. So you could say we are back into a new normal, whatever that is. I don't think there is one of those things. I think it's just a constant state of adaptiveness, challenge, and chaos. But with those kind of shifting work patterns, one of the things I'm sensing is that there's operating models being reset all over the business world, whatever industry you're in. And as a result of that, HR in itself is also being called to reset its operating model, so that we've got what's on screen there: enhanced capabilities, innovative products and services from the HR, people and culture profession, leading to more impactful people proposition and organisational success. Why is all that coming to being, though? I mean, that's, three letters, big word. Let's have a look at some of that. The first why is the state of polycrisis, as the World Economic Forum called it in February of 2023. Such a cluster of things that are all happening at the same time: economic fragility, cost of living rise, inflation, war, civil unrest, all manner of things all seem to be combining at the same time. So it's not a crisis, it's a series of crises, or as WEF called it, polycrisis. And then if we think about technology, probably the last year has been dominated by the advent of generative AI, large language models, and that shift into much more, I guess you'd say, sort of consumer and citizen accessible artificial intelligence. So we're now starting to see people who are using this, and we're seeing academic institutions and educational institutions going, don't do your homework using ChatGPT. But some enlightened professorial types are saying, yep, use it, but check it, validate it, spot where it gets it wrong. That's how you'll learn in the future, because it is human machine teaming, I think we're starting to see now. But that unnerves a lot of people, and to many, it's both a dawning of opportunity and utter crisis situation when people are worried about whether AI and machines and scripts and robotic process applications are going to take their jobs away. So the former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, gave a speech fairly recently in 2023, around about end of September time. And he said the problem we've got now is that we've got to deal with everything everywhere all at once. So an homage to the movie, but absolutely how it feels. It's a hotbed, it's a cooking pot, it is all sorts of things we could describe as metaphorical ways of saying there's not just one line of attack, there's not just one line to start with, it is a number of different things, all at the same time, all at once, everywhere. Another why, the fourth why, is this sense of skills. What are the skills that we are in need of both now and in the future, and that we need to probably just let go of because they're no longer relevant and valid? So this whole sense of talent, this whole sense of capability, and this whole sense of what skills we have is a very unnerving position because of this rise of technology, this intensity. Recent reports, CIPD in October 2023 issued a report about absolute 10-year high mental ill health and stress and work-related absence. That's been going for some time and featured in my book, The Energised Workplace, and a previous Inspirathon talk. So there's a lot to put right, and skills are at the heart of it. There are a lot of things we can do better and learn more skills to deploy. What are they? How do we get them? Who knows them? There's a lot of dilemmas, paradoxes, and challenges there. The other thing is we're tired, linked to that mental health crises I talked about just now, but also we're fatigued by that sense of constant change and adaptation. I think there was a time when we would declare a change program within an organisation, people went, hurrah, we're going to do something better and different. Now people are like, not again. They're craving stability at a time that the rest of the world just will not let us do that. So there's something about how we can recalibrate what changes so that we don't get fatigued by it, but we can sequence it and become more adept at handling those things. That's possibly one of the big skills, how we can integrate change, I guess, with our kind of business and operations as usual. And then the other, highlighted by a McKinsey report here, some employees are destroying value, others are building it. Do you know the difference? I mean, it's really now difficult to nail productivity, to talk about the right kind of behaviours, to allow people to have expression, free will, but also line to organisational priorities, endeavours, and so on. So this is a really difficult time for the relationship between organisations, leaders, and their people. And we're all kind of idiots at the moment. I had the pleasure of speaking to Margaret Heffernan last month in September 23. Margaret Heffernan's great author, great coach, great kind of almost soothsayer on what's relevant and hot and topical now. And she said managers, leaders are all struggling because this kind of change and this kind of intensity is not something they've come across before. So they're struggling, as are we, at a time that we're looking to them for guidance. They're just not sure. And that's a difficult thing to admit. So the 6 whys. There's a 5 why methodology, but I threw in an extra one simply because of the chaotic nature of the world. But how do we get over this then? The first thing that I will talk about today is this strong sense of meaning about how we need something desperately tangible, valuable, inspiring, comforting, meaningful to hang on to. It doesn't mean to say that you have to be in some high-powered white-collar job. This is where we're saying, what am I all about? How do I find myself? Who do I link arms with? How do we create the most difference? Whenever I talk to people in a range of organisations that I do in my consulting work, there's one thing that's really common. People want and like to make a difference, to show that what they do has value and meaning. That cuts right across any role, any level, any sense of maturity, any stage of career, any age, demographic, or whatever. People want to know that what they do has meaning and purpose and value. The second one is a big one for the people profession because it's all about organisation design and systems. The way we're operating is still very strongly influenced by 20th century industrialised thinking, hierarchies, linearity, predictability, stability, replication. However, the world says, not good enough anymore. So we're starting to see the pressure being put on our operating models, our operating systems, our design, our processes, and just how efficient, effective, and optimized we can be. That's a word I'm using deliberately a lot. Optimized. Are we doing the things that matter at the time that matters most in a way that doesn't box us in, but sets a real domino reaction to more good that can come from it? OD and systems thinking, huge part of that. The third how is something that's been with us for some time and is starting to really become more regularized, normalized, accessible, understandable, data-led, but very much about people, behaviors, and the science of that. People are very unpredictable. I think we would absolutely all subscribe to that kind of theory. However, science tells us that there are certain ways we can model, conceptualize, theorize, and therefore apply thinking around how people think, how they behave, what they do in certain circumstances, situations, normatives, And of course, the emerging awareness, I guess, of things like neurodiversity and the spectrum of things like autism. Those things are becoming much more known, much more adaptations coming in. Long way to go. People science has a lot to offer in solutions. So there's just three hows there. I mean, they're pretty big hows, don't get me wrong. I'm not denying that that takes quite some learning and quite some application, test, experiment, and adapt. Bottom line is, though, all of this is calling the people profession, or HR as we still kind of know it, to some kind of renaissance. And that's why I think it's about HR being an accelerant of change, not a resistor or a lag on change or behind the curve. It's almost calling HR to go, look, people, org design, meaning, these are all your domains. You've got a stronger part to play now, as you showed us during COVID, in terms of stability and safety and rigor and continued working and so on. This is a new way that we can test the HR kind of capability, stamina, and creativity. Because the future of work is about all of us: people, planet, prosperity. Those three P's. Notice I didn't say profit, because I think that's what's gotten us into some bad situations. Pre-pandemic, greed. It's not about greed, it's about prosperity. It's about shared sense of value creation, benefiting and upticking what we expect from life and what we experience from it. How do we do that? First port of call, I think, is a sense that we can all join together, but also break free from constraints, right? So this image depicts the kind of chain breaking into free-flowing avians, right? And I think there's something in here about self-managed, self-organised, autonomous systems of working that do that. So the only thing we can do isn't more constriction, it's more liberation. Might seem chaotic, but absolutely we need all eyes, all arms, all heads, all hearts, all linking together, but individually liberated in order to do so. Choice and things like that are really, really crucial. The right choices, the right aligned choices. And the phrase I absolutely love, we'll come to in a second, is aligned self-interest. That's what we need. So when I say I'll come to it in a moment, here's where there were already some predictions in 2014 about this kind of shifting paradigm, if we want to use that phrase. This is the work of Belgian Frederic Laloux, who ejected from the corporate machine at McKinsey and went on a research piece to find organisations who were more soulful. That's kind of his phrase. And he found the patterns in those liberated and strongly sustainable humanistic organisations were in three areas. And here they are on screen. Self-management, as I said earlier on. Team self-organised, liberated, there's that word again, from choking bureaucracy and management interference. Literally removing some of the management task and, I guess, scrutiny roles to more coaching, supportive and enabling roles. Wholeness, that people find themselves through their work and they flourish, one of my favourite words, through their difference and individualism. So we've talked about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, even justice. Now I think it's all about wholeness, because that is who you are, what you are, no matter what your protected characteristics or anything else. And then the most powerful pull and force, I guess, is that meaning thing I talked about, but framed here beautifully and elegantly as evolutionary purpose. People find something worth dedicating themselves to and outperform sustainably. That's the writing on the wall. Who does that, though? This is Dutch nursing care organisation, Beurtzorg. And what they have mastered and was featured in Fred Laloux's book is this sense of liberation. Teams of 12 nurses, without managerial interference, support patients' lives in their own homes, where they're recuperating, where they're having remedial treatment, and just create a stronger sense of community and patient centricity to care, not just administration, box ticking and KPIs. On the next slide, you'll see some statistics that might make your mind blow a bit. Because if you're in care through Beurtzorg, if you have to go into hospitalisation, you are then much less than those who don't have Beurtzorg to support them. If you are looking at operating costs, Beurtzorg operate at around 8% for corporate support and governance, whereas most of the Dutch healthcare organisations, it's a quarter of their budget is simply on operating costs. This means more nurses can be employed to care for more people in a more patient-centred, much more calming, gentle, and not sort of mechanistic way. So where hospital admission is reduced by 33%, that is a bonus to the entire Dutch healthcare system. They have high scores on customer quality. They have an enormous impact on the economics of the Dutch healthcare system. Dutch regulator reviews really high. Best employer rankings really high. Pay above the market rate. This is how Buurtzorg do their kind of service-led, human-centric patient care. And it's economically proven, and it's sustainable, and it's liberating, and it goes against almost all mechanistic organisational methodologies. But they're not alone. So there is the Buurtzorg logo in amongst a whole range of others. The Semco story from the 1980s and 90s in engineering, hire in white goods and electronics, wellbeing teams in healthcare in the northwest of England, Indigo volunteers across all sorts of areas where refugee status is threatening people's lives, into education with Treehouse and publishing with Medium, and more and more and more. So these are all companies who have liberated how they work, are self-managed, are evolutionary purpose driven, and are wholeness kind of principled. And there's more. So these companies are freedom-centered, are operating in a way that isn't about hierarchical dominance. It's about togetherness. It's about co-creation. It's about adaptability. The patterns are there, whether it's education, making hearing aids, computer support, or anything in between. Here's another what. We need new operating systems and models as part of this kind of work renaissance and evolution. And this is where OD and HR's role in that particular field comes into play, because we do not build for stuckness. We build for a perpetual sense of constant improvement. We build for adaptability. We build entropic states. So by that I mean the kind of physical, chemical state of things that are dispersed, not highly kind of centralized and concentrated, to match the challenges that are coming at us from a highly dispersed, highly entropic state. And that we are better able to manage paradoxes, not polarities, paradoxes, things that could be either or and. So there's something in paradoxes. We need to get better. So these are almost like the archetypes, the sensations of new operating systems and models that we need to create. So if you can stress test your own operating model and systems and see whether any of these apply, if they don't, you're in trouble, because the world will conspire against you. And then we see people like Josh Bersin, who's an analyst in the people and culture and learning area, who wrote a book called Irresistible about some really enduring employee-focused organisations. He came up with several conclusions. They're all numbered number one here, but that may be deliberate because none of them are more important than the other. Teams not hierarchy, work not jobs, coach not a boss, culture not rules, growth not promotion, purpose not profit, employee experience not outputs. They're pretty much an encapsulation of all the things I've just been saying. So when I read this book, it was almost like, wow, I'm not alone in finding this, and I know I'm not, but somebody with the influence of Josh Bersin is clearly leaning towards this more liberated sense of what an organisation should be about. So in response to that, I've started to think about, how does HR operate like this? And here's my model of the future for HR. I call it HR 3.0 because we're headed into Web 3.0. It does feel like HR has had the 1.0 version with Dave Ulrich's model at the top of 3 kind of consistent streams of activity: shared service, centre of excellence, L&D, payroll, legal, that kind of thing, and business partners who link and create business related human advice, inputs, and deployable systems and support, to intersectional, domain-led, very fluid, responsive model that I've called 3.0, built around products, people, processes, and systems, so those things I mentioned earlier on, and with a whole new cadre of roles: people and performance analysts, relationship brokers, psychologists to talk to people science, product managers who are building things that people can use to help them do their work, that are legal, compliant, safe, consistent, assuring, and add value. The systems designers who glue it all together, the practice leads and coaches when things go a bit wrong and need a bit of addressing and need some adaptation. People operations who underpin the whole thing with sensible, compliant administration that really, really gives us a strong footing, and meaning makers, people who can connect people to the purpose and meaning of what work is all about. So that's my new model for this. What else though? What else in this kind of smorgasbord of psychology and learning? I've been very drawn to the work of psychologist Robert Keegan, based out of Harvard Business School. He has a build on the psychological framework that was created by Piaget back in the 1930s, if you want to check it out. Anyway, he's adapted it and calls it the adult development theory. And he says it isn't about learning new things, adding to the container of the mind. It's about transformation, changing the way we know and understand the world. So that's a very big leap from just acquiring new things to process to kind of consistently apply them. It's actually calling us to be a little bit more unorthodox in how we do things in order to meet the world where it is. Here's a few ways I can explain this to you in a couple of minutes. Doing it no service at all, but just headlining and spotlighting. There's stage 1 and 2, which is when we are sort of very infant and kind of junior adolescent. Stage 3 is when we start to become more adult, and it's called the socialised mind. There's about 58% of us here. Nothing wrong with being in this state of mind because we've got needs and interests already accruing for us. We kind of know what we like to do. We know what we have already done that helps us with that choice and that direction. But we're very strongly the subject of our relationships and mutuality with others. You know, teenagers like to hang out with other teenagers for a reason. As we get older, we like to affiliate with groups and you know, kind of professional bodies and all sorts of things like that, right? So that's the mutuality we talk about there. That links to our evolutionary purpose. There's a kind of sense of what's it all about and how do I belong to it. So there's something in Keegan's work that kind of ticks that particular box. The next one, though, is where 35% of us are, and it's called the self-authoring mind. Again, it's not about age or particular kind of experience or maturity, because you could find yourself authorizing mind quite quickly in your sort of cycle of development. So you could be incredibly young and have a self-authoring mind. These people are perhaps, you know, not quite prodigies, but getting there. So we've got this internal seat of judgment. We can define who we are versus looking to external validation. Right? So this is those people who might appear confident and not need social capital in the way that others do, because you've got that mutuality, and so therefore you are more ideological. And you have an identity that is in pursuit of that. So that's where self-management comes in, because with that in mind, you have that, what I called earlier on, aligned self-interest. So this is a really important part of how we can see that work is shifting towards being told what to do, to belonging to something where there's guidance from others, and then listening to your own internal seat of judgment. And then stage 5. Dalai Lama territory here. There's only 1% of us here because you just are. The subject of you just is. You've got the membership and the identity and the ideology and all those other things, right? Which is why only 1% of us actually get there. This is absolutely kind of transcendental, nirvana-esque, utopian sort of state of being. But there's something in it about the Buddhist concept of the evolving self. It's constantly in flux and change. So you don't find yourself and fix yourself. You are so responsive to almost the cosmos that's where this state comes in. Now, if we think about Greek philosophy, Aristotle coined the phrase eudaimonia, which means this highest state of human good and constant sense of flourishing. So that's what we could call wholeness. So those 3 things in the Lalou book in 14 map beautifully, I think, to these 3 stages of adult development and are real key parts of how we can see work is evolving beyond those kind of technological, professional domain, transactional things. There's a lot of spiritual stuff going on here that we need to be mindful of. But just to bring it back to skills, because I did talk about that earlier on, in 2021, the team and I did some research on research. What were people putting out as research? Lots of it is the answer. And it was not necessarily consistent, and some of it was a little bit kind of opposite. And so what we did was we kind of corralled all of that, about 60 really powerful reports, and we did a kind of an aggregation from their skills predictions and forecasts to create this list you see on the left. Performance analytics, psychology, you can see where some of the things I've been talking about are featuring in a lot of people's minds about what we need to be really, really good at in capabilities and skills in the immediate future. And we did it again in 23, so 2 years on. What does it look like? Now, the bold ones in the 10 on the right are almost like repeat, so behavioural analyst and scientist, agents of purpose, exploiting data, experience and design. There's some new ones, multifaceted leader. That's almost like the high entropic state leader. Whole person well-being, so talking back to the things we've found in some of the statistical relevance about mental ill health, stress, and so on. Inclusivity and bias has become a stronger sense of a new form of capability needed, with people deliberately creating culture wars and divisive rhetoric, even in politics, which you wouldn't expect it to. But anyway, lifelong learning and future visioneering, these things are really important. Like, how do we calibrate ourselves constantly? Well, we learn all the time. But to what? We'll have a vision, and the learning will help that vision come to play. So that's the skill set for 2023 for people, professionals, and leaders. And then starting to wrap up now, where does that all come together? Well, here we go. The sense here from Gel Mater's quote, I think, is powerful. People don't persevere because they are good at perseverance. They persevere because they find things that are worth investing in. It is really tough for people to persevere right now. And so what I think I've done in this short half hour is really start to unpack what is worth investing in order to persevere. And that self-managed, self-organised, autonomous systems of working that gives us that sense of liberation is where HR can be an accelerant of that change with science, organisation design, the strengthening sense of meaning, how everything calibrates to that. I think that's within HR's gift and its kind of jurisdiction. And therefore, HR, using those skills I just talked about, could step up strongly and say, the post-pandemic support and enabling wasn't a blip, it was a sign of where we should be in driving businesses forward to a future that is much more congruent with a creative and knowledge-based economy than the industrial hangover that we still have. HR as architects of liberation then, so that our people find things that are worth investing in. And there's no more noble pursuit, the sense of higher good, than you really defining what's worth investing in, and your organisation and your colleagues help you do that. So that's my end of talk. If you want to get in touch with me, there's my details. And as I said earlier on, we are an organisation that's very mission-led. We're tiny, but we like to have huge ambition, and hope you've enjoyed hearing about where we see that ambition can take us and is kind of directed, but we're all in it together. So let's join forces and do what it says on that slide there. Create better business for a better world. And with that, I will leave you to the rest of the marvellous Inspirathon that Matt, Amy and the team pulled together from Inspiring Workplaces. And our mission is set. Our energy is there. Let's lean in, link arms, make it happen. Enjoy the rest of the event. Thanks very much.